Okay, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really turbulent 60-year saga that literally drew the modern map of Eastern Europe. If you've ever wondered why the borders in that specific part of the world look the way they do today, or why the geopolitical tension there feels just so deeply rooted, well, the answer lies in this incredibly fascinating, chaotic period of history.
So how exactly did a 17th century rebellion forge the borders of modern empires? We're looking at a very specific window in time here, from 1648 to 1709. It actually started as a pretty localized quest for regional autonomy, but man, it escalated quickly. It triggered massive regional conflicts and shifted the global balance of power forever. It's just a crazy story of how localized grievances can literally rewrite the world map.
Part 1. The Great Cossack Revolt, a fight for autonomy. We'll kick things off in the mid-17th century. Now, imagine a highly militarized frontier society, the Cossacks. At the time, they were living within the massive, sprawling superpower of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which, by the way, was actually one of the largest and most populous countries in 17th century Europe. The Cossacks, who really thrived along the steppes and those major river systems, essentially lit a powder keg right in the empire's backyard. There were people desperately seeking self-determination, demanding basic social rights, religious freedom, and of course, relief from the harsh taxes imposed by overlords who just wanted to control them. And right at the center of this storm was Bogdan Khmelnytsky. His leadership is what actually sparked this massive uprising into existence back in 1648. But Khmelnytsky wasn't just a tough military commander, right? He was a master political tactician. He somehow managed to unite these really diverse, often unruly Cossack factions into a terrifyingly effective fighting force, one that actually brought the mighty Commonwealth to its knees. I mean, to pull off a rebellion of this scale against one of Europe's biggest empires, that takes an extraordinary level of charisma and strategic brilliance.
Moving on to Part 2, A Fateful Alliance, Geopolitical Survival.
So while military victories out on the open field are one thing, securing long-term statehood against angry, powerful neighbors is an entirely different puzzle. Khmelnytsky found himself caught in what we could call a pendulum swing. It's the classic curse of being a buffer state. He was constantly forced to weigh these super dangerous shifting alliances with the massive power surrounding him: the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the Ottoman Empire, and the Tsardom of Muscovy. It was literally the ultimate diplomatic tightrope walk, essentially trying to play massive empires off each other just to keep his movement alive.
And that delicate balancing act brings us to the 1654 Treaty of Pereyaslav with Muscovy. Now, this wasn't just some boring piece of paper. It was a desperate, incredibly high-stakes roll of the dice. Khmelnytsky, who desperately needed military backup, swore an oath to the Russian Tsar. The thing is, the Cossacks viewed it as a temporary, conditional military pact, right? Like a marriage of convenience. But Muscovy, they viewed it as permanent submission. And that profound misunderstanding over a single treaty planted the seeds for immense future tragedy. It shifted the whole situation from a quest for an ally to an invitation for a master.
Which brings us to Part 3, The Ruin and Partition, a fractured state.
Well, that fateful roll of the dice led directly to a devastating era known in regional history as the Ruin. And let me tell you, it absolutely lived up to its dark name. Just look at this. From the glorious uprising in 1648 to the Pereyaslav Agreement in 1654, and finally the Treaty of Andrusovo in 1667. In less than 2 decades, the dream of a unified Cossack state completely fractured under the immense pressure of those rival empires. Constant warfare, shifting allegiances, and bitter civil war completely tore the region apart.
The Treaty of Andrusovo actually utilized the Dnieper River, which is the very heart, the absolute lifeblood of the region, as a physical dividing line to just chop the Cossack lands in half. The rival empires of Poland and Muscovy essentially sat down at a table together and sliced the territory right down the middle, entirely over the heads of the Cossacks themselves. It was this sweeping imperial partition that completely ignored the people actually living there.
So the fate of the Cossacks was now violently fractured. On the left bank, lands were allied with and heavily subordinate to Muscovy. On the right bank, the territory was forced back under the control of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. This division violently split their loyalties between East and West, literally turning brother against brother. The very autonomy they had bled for was being actively erased by the very empires that had promised to protect them. Let's look at Part 4, Mazeppa's risky gamble, defection to Sweden. Emerging from the ashes of this partition comes a final, doomed gamble for survival against a rapidly centralizing empire.
Here we have Hetman Ivan Mazepa on one side and the relentlessly ambitious Tsar Peter the Great on the other. Ironically, Mazepa had actually been a highly loyal ally to Peter for over a decade. But as Peter's demands grew heavier, taxing the Cossacks mercilessly, using them as cannon fodder in endless foreign wars, and systematically stripping away their traditional freedoms, Mazepa realized that left bank autonomy was being completely erased.
Feeling that grip of Muscovy tightening, Mazepa executes the ultimate pendulum swing. He makes the stunning decision to defect and secretly ally with King Charles XII of Sweden during the Great Northern War. At the time, the Swedish military was considered the invincible powerhouse of Europe. So Mazepa genuinely believed that combining his forces with the Swedish war machine would be the absolute masterstroke required to break free from Peter the Great once and for all, and finally restore a unified Cossack state.
And that leads us to our final section, Part 5, The Verdict of Poltava, a definitive clash.
This audacious defection set off a truly catastrophic domino effect. First, Mazepa makes his high-stakes political gamble. But almost immediately following that, Europe was hit by the Great Frost of 1709. This was a winter so brutally cold that birds reportedly froze in midair. Absolutely wild. This absolute nightmare of a winter completely decimated the marching Swedish forces. Starving, freezing, and cut off from their supply lines, this once invincible army was led straight into a decisive trap.
The Battle of Poltava wasn't just a military defeat. It was a total slaughter and an absolute turning point. Peter the Great's modernized, well-supplied army completely overwhelmed Charles and Mazepa. In just a single afternoon of brutal combat, Sweden's era as a major European superpower abruptly ended. And tragically, the final nail was hammered into the coffin of Cossack independence. The dream of autonomy effectively died right there in the snow and mud of Poltava.
And the ripple effect of that single afternoon was just undeniable. It firmly established the Russian Empire as the supreme dominant force in Eastern Europe. The autonomy the Cossacks had fought so hard for, those precious freedoms they tried to balance on the edge of a geopolitical knife, they were systematically dismantled and erased in the decades that followed. Poltava wasn't just a battle, it was literally the violent birth of an imperial superpower.
Ultimately, the verdict of history here is incredibly clear. The battle marked the end of the Cossack state as a significant independent player and the undeniable rise of the Russian Empire. It's a 60-year geopolitical tragedy where the relentless pursuit of freedom was swallowed whole by the massive gravity of imperial expansion. The classic buffer state was inevitably crushed by the empires that desperately tried to hold at bay.
So, I'm going to leave you with this to reflect on. As borders shift and alliances swing today, are we still living in the echoes of Poltava? History isn't just a collection of old dates and dusty maps, right? It's the living foundation of our present reality. When we examine the shifting alliances and complex tensions in modern Eastern Europe, how much of this 17th century history is still repeating itself today? Thank you so much for exploring this explainer with me, and definitely keep questioning the history behind the headlines.